Revolución es sentido del momento histórico, es cambiar todo lo que debe ser cambiado, es igualdad y libertad plenas, es ser tratado y tratar a los demás como seres humanos. Revolución es unidad, es independencia, es luchar por nuestro sueño de justicia para Cuba y para el mundo, que es la base de nuestro patriotismo, nuestro socialismo y nuestro internacionalismo.
South Bronx. Yo, grito viva Fidel en el nombre del Mir y de Miguel. Yo sigo pa'lante hasta siempre comandante, con mis rimas y mi arte participo con mi parte. Internacional, un chileno en el Yuma, International, Angola, junto a Cuba. Revolutionaries up in Harlem, eating Malcolm. Bay of Pigs invasion, man, we all know the outcome. Building with Mandela, building with Allende. Anticapitalista, el pueblo pobre está presente. I'm worldwide, like a Cuban doctor. Revolution is the only option. COINTELPRO, man, I know the feds watching. They just mad cause Cuba won in boxing. They want Havana for an East Coast Vegas, but Fidel made them put on the brakes, creating changes.
Comandante, ¿cómo formaste mi camino? Lo que fue ese destino de un niño que ha crecido afuera en el exilio. No en Miami, no gusano, soy del otro lado. Padres expulsados por Pinocho, un golpe de estado. Inspirado por la lucha, en Cuba había un ejemplo, tomándose el poder con unos pocos guerrilleros, en servicio al pueblo, no por el imperio, en contra de la empresa y monopolio de los medios. Y eso fue la historia de una gran victoria. Nuevas formaciones, nuevos sueños de gloria. Otra vía era posible, inspirando a miles. El MIR creció en Chile, entrenando en el Caribe. Ayuda solidaria panafricana, pan para todas las casas, las masas educadas. Y ahora que nos queda, la verdad se revela. Dictadura verdadera en la calle Pennsylvania. Yo no sé. What I do now.
¿Qué será?
We gon' walk together.
Yo me muero como viví. Yo me muero como viví.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's program, Broaden and Deepen U.S., Cuban, Palestinian international solidarity against the forces of imperialism, colonialism, fascism, white supremacy, and Zionism, from Washington, D.C. to Tel Aviv. My name is Dr. Howard Ehrman. In 1968, I joined the first Rainbow Coalition in Chicago, working with the Black Panther Party and Young Lords to help build the People's Health Movement. In 1969, several of us organized the first Venceremos Brigade to Cuba. Later, after medical school, I became Chicago's Assistant Health Commissioner and Assistant Professor of Family Medicine and Public Health at the University of Illinois. Last year, we began Levántate por Cuba, Rise Up with Cuba, to broaden and deepen the U.S.-Cuban movement by uniting in solidarity and struggle with all peoples, organizations, and nations, fighting for liberation, self-determination, and against all forms of oppression, both internationally and inside the United States. We are proud to be one of 60 member organizations of the National Network on Cuba. Today's program focuses on, first, 3 U.S. graduates and a third-year medical student of Cuba's ELAM, Free International Medical School, who will explain why they went to school there, how you can, and why ELAM is essential to building global solidarity. We're asking each of you to spread the message of ELAM far and wide, in particular to working class high school and college students of color, to make sure we fill the 10 U.S. admission seats each year. Second, we will hear from the Director of International Organizations of Cuba's Public Health Ministry, on Cuba's internationalism from Palestine to Africa to Vietnam to Chicago. Third, how the genocidal blockade of Cuba hurts the peoples of both Cuba and the United States. Since 1959, since the 1959 revolution, Cuba has demonstrated in its actions more international solidarity and mutual aid than any country in history. This includes sending thousands of its own soldiers to fight for the national liberation of South Africa, Namibia, and Angola. Nelson Mandela said, "The Cuban people hold a special place in the hearts of the people of Africa." ELAM is part of 65 years of Cuba's medical internationalism that began when it sent a grade of health workers and emergency responders to Chile following a devastating earthquake in 1960. Cuba's anti-colonial health program was officially launched in 1963 when it sent a medical team to Algeria to help rebuild its health system after gaining independence, signifying a focus on supporting anti-colonial movements throughout the world through medical aid. Since then, tens of thousands of Cuban doctors, nurses, and other health workers have gone on health missions to 165 countries, including into the United States here in Chicago. Before we start, we would like to review today's community agreements. You are welcome to put questions, comments, announcements in the chat at any time during each presentation. We'll have two opportunities for questions and answers from the audience. The first is after the ELAM presentations. We encourage any students and their families thinking about going to ELAM to ask questions. We ask each person to limit their questions or comments to 2 minutes or less. Please raise your hand using the icon function in Google Meets at the bottom of the screen. If that doesn't work, then please put your question in the chat. The second opportunity for questions is at the end of the program. We begin today with 3 videos about ELAM, followed by the U.S. coordinator, Dr. Samira Addrey. Dr. Addrey is a Ghanaian-American physician, global health advocate, and mentor committed to health equity and systemic justice. A summa cum laude graduate of the Latin American School of Medicine, ELAM in Cuba, she supports U.S. medical students as a scholarship program coordinator for IFCO, Pastors for Peace, and coordinates impactful humanitarian projects. With a psychology background from Fisk University, Dr. Addrey has a rich history of advocacy, public speaking, and community engagement. Dr. Addrey will be introducing the 3 other ELAMs, but now for the videos. Thank you very much.
It had always been one of my dreams to study internationally medicine.
I've excelled in science courses.
I would love to go back to Newark and practice.
By becoming a doctor, I'd be able to impact more change.
I didn't have money for medical school, and so the opportunity with Cuba opened up, and it was perfect because it was a way to benefit my community.
Y es uno de los valores fundamentales que debe tener todo médico de ciencia y conciencia, debe tener estos valores para ayudar así a todos los países del resto del mundo.
As these doctors return, they can help in many ways revolutionize health in the United States.
We did not go to Cuba to then come to the United States to reproduce what is here. We came here to start something new.
There is a new army of doctors coming that want to change the scope of medicine.
It had always been one of my dreams.
I'm from San Francisco, California.
I'm from Queens, New York. Austin, Texas. I live in Maryland. I'm here studying medicine in Havana, Cuba.
I'm a current 5th year at the Latin American School of Medicine.
In pretty much all of our cases, we would not have been able to afford to go to medical school in our country. It was just a little strange idea to leave home for so long but it's also following your dream. So sometimes you got to make sacrifices.
This is a huge opportunity because you don't see nowadays that a country is giving full ride scholarships for students who wanted to study medicine.
The program is aimed at low-income students, people that come from underserved communities.
I realized that I either had to get into debt or I had to not study medicine. And if I had to get into debt, in order for me to serve my community, I wouldn't be able to because I would have to pay back that debt.
The idea is to, once we become doctors, is to return to our low-income communities, underserved communities, and essentially serve them because there is a huge deficit when it comes to access to healthcare services.
We get to go back and serve our communities directly because we're not going to be burdened with the idea of not being able to afford to live in our country, pay our bills, and also heal people.
I wanted to be a doctor who is affordable for everyone, who can communicate with the community, who can help others.
I jumped at the idea because I've only heard great stuff about Cuban doctors.
Here, everybody gets treated no matter what, but over there, they're not too keen on treating you if you can't pay.
A lot of people can't afford insurance, and a lot of people don't get the care that they need.
I know personally, my family, several members being uninsured for a long time. People only go to the doctor when it's an emergency, and that emergency is often a condition that could have been prevented.
My brother has cancer, and so my mom has good insurance, but I wonder if my mom didn't have good insurance, would they treat them as well? Would they order him all these tests,
Medicine at the community level is significantly different than medicine at the community level in the U.S., which is practically inexistent.
So it's really, really amazing to see that community aspect and the doctors literally forming an amazing part and has a big role within the community that they're serving.
Here in Cuba, we learned that treating a patient is not just giving the medicine. It's about communication. It's about understanding what is going through the patient's life. And all that is going to make the patient feel better. And actually, that will help to give a better treatment.
The family medicine doctors are able to catch a patient before they decompensate.
Something amazing that we get to do in this program is that starting second year, we get to see patients. We get to work with a doctor, with a nurse in the consultorios.
They have learned more empathy and community. And I feel like in America, we really don't have a strong community base.
One thing that's very interesting out here is despite the shortages, due to the blockade, due to, the current economic situation, you see how the community tries to connect the patients with what they need.
I feel like being in Cuba has been an amazing experience, and I honestly wouldn't have changed that position for anything.
Living in Cuba and then going back to the States is very different. People are not the same. They're not as friendly.
I've really seen how Cubans look out for each other and also how they embrace us in a way that I feel like in our country, they don't always embrace foreigners as well as we should.
It has been a great experience. It's been a great last 7 years. It has had its difficulties, but I've definitely learned a lot. I've definitely learned solidarity with people, being there for people even in the hardest of moments, because that's what medicine really is. Medicine is really empathy.
I'm from San
بتذكر أول محاولة إلي لأسافر، كيف ودعت أهلي، وبتذكر كلام أبوي وأمي وعمامي. كنت فرحان إنه راح أتعرف على العالم. أنا وصلت كوبا ب 31/12/2017. كنت متوتر أول ما وصلت على كوبا وأنا طريقي على الإيلام، لأنه بلشت أحقق حلمي. تفاجأت كثير بعدد الطلاب الموجود وجنسياتهم المختلفة، كانوا من مختلف دول العالم، تقريبا من 100 دولة. التجربة حلوة كتير، إنك تشوف هذا العدد من الطلاب من مختلف دول العالم، اللي مستحيل حتى تفكر إنك راح تزورها، أو حتى تعرف إنها موجودة. كلنا عنا إشي مشترك، إنه ما قدرنا ندرس الطب بدولنا وحصلنا على منحة مجانية بكوبا. هان في كلية أمريكا اللاتينية للطب بنتعلم نصير أطباء إنسانيين مع قيم أخلاقية، إنه نهتم باحتياجات الناس ومش بالأموال أو الأشياء المادية اللي بنقدر نحصل عليها كأطباء. الوقت مر بسرعة كبيرة، قضيت وقت حلو بالإعلام وصار عندي أصحاب كتير، وهذا الإشي ساعدني إنه أتكيف بسرعة. بس وصلت ما كنت أعرف أي شيء عن اللغة وما كنت أفهم شيء بالإسباني، عشان هيك كان الإشي صعب شوي، وساعدني أصحابي اللاتينيين والكوبيين وبلشت أتعلم شوي شوي. مدرسة أمريكا اللاتينية للطب بتعني إلنا كتير كفلسطينيين، لأنها منحتنا فرصة كبيرة لنحقق أحلامنا إنه نصير أطباء. إحنا موجودين هون لنرجع للوطن كأطباء ونساعد شعبنا، لأنه إحنا عندنا نقص بالموارد، حتى بعدد الأطباء عندنا نقص. رح نرجع لنساند الشعب الفلسطيني ليتحرر. من 7 أكتوبر وأنا عايش بقلق وتوتر وخايف من أي أخبار بتصل من غزة، لأنه في كتير عالم عم تستشهد وبطل في أماكن بالقطاع آمنة، كله قاعد بنقصف. النظام الصحي في فلسطين خصوصا بغزة قبل الحرب كان منهار، وبسبب الحصار اللي أدى لنقص معدات اللي بيحتاجها الدكتور، وكمان نقص أدوية وموارد في المستشفيات. مع الحرب كل شيء صار أسوأ، والمستشفيات بطلت مناطق آمنة لأنهم بقصفوها، واللي ما انقصف ما فيها كهرباء أو بترول لتضل تشتغل يعني. بس دكاترة غزة اللي خلوا المستشفى ضلوا يشتغل بأقل القليل، يعني بأقل الإمكانيات، يخلوها تستمر يعني لإنقاذ حياة الشعب الفلسطيني.
So let's take a brief pause to let the weight of the content settle before speaking. But what you just witnessed is not just a story, it is a testament to the power of solidarity. A young Palestinian shaped by the devastation of war renews his hope and purpose in an institution halfway across the world, in Cuba, at the Latin American School of Medicine. However, this narrative extends beyond one student. It embodies a global vision championed by the Cuban Revolution, which asserts that healthcare is a human right. Earlier, you saw US students explaining why they chose to study in Cuba. Their experiences highlight how many of us who seek to heal others are deeply aware of the injustices within healthcare and the inequalities that decide who receives care and who must endure suffering. The Cuban approach to health and medical training emphasizes that doctors should serve the people, not profit. It teaches that when systems fail the most vulnerable, we do not merely provide charity. Instead, we offer solidarity and work to build a new system. And that is exactly why ELAM was created. As you'll see on this first slide, I'm going to go over a little bit about the history of ELAM. So what does it mean to truly revolutionize healthcare? Not just to treat disease, but to transform the very systems that create health disparities. In 1998, after Hurricanes Mitch and George devastated the Caribbean and Central America, Cuba didn't just send doctors. They asked a bigger question. How do we prevent this suffering from happening again? Their question had an answer, and the answer was ELAM. Cuba realized that sending emergency aid was not enough. They needed a long-term solution. So they transformed a naval base into a medical school with a mission to train doctors from overexploited and underserved communities to serve their people. Cuba transformed a naval base into a medical school because just as this event is named Doctors, Not Bombs, Comandante en Jefe Fidel Castro believed in channeling the power of education to heal the world. But ELAM isn't just about creating doctors, it's about creating the right kind of doctors. Doctors who just don't diagnose and prescribe, but who understand that medicine is a matter of social justice. The healthcare is about people, not profit. Next slide, please. So at ELAM, our education emphasizes the biopsychosocial model, and ELAM's curriculum shapes a new kind of physician. The biopsychosocial model emphasizes the importance of understanding human health and illness in its fullest context. The biopsychosocial approach systematically considers biological, psychological, and social factors and their complex interactions in understanding health, illness, and healthcare delivery. Studying in the Cuban classroom requires collaboration rather than the cutthroat competitive culture groomed in pre-med and medical learning environments in the US. I'm going to share a little bit about how compañerismo, the concept of solidarity among students, helps us succeed at ELAM. I will never forget how compañerismo helped us succeed and unlearn competitive habits. I had a classmate from Yemen, Bashir, who initially struggled to learn Spanish because Arabic is so different from Latin-based languages. So as a higher performing student, my professor paired me up with him for every evaluation. I was charged with Bashir's progress. I couldn't be just satisfied with my personal success and forget the rest. We all had to succeed for the class and our professor to be satisfied. So we studied every night together, clutching our English, Arabic, and Spanish dictionaries to find ways to communicate and understand each other. Every win for Bashir was a win for me and the rest of the class. Compañerismo changed us. We bonded in struggle and triumph. So what does this mean for us, for the communities we serve? It means that medicine isn't just about treating patients. Next slide, please. It's about fighting for our patients, fighting against the systems that make them sick in the first place. Here on this slide, you'll see a quote by Dr. Lillian Burnett, a graduate of 2017 of ELAM. She says, Cubans would say there's a role the physician has to play around addressing gun violence in the community, around addressing addiction in the community, addressing police brutality in the community. Those are things people are dying from, even if there's not a pill for them. You need to understand the impact that all those other social, political, and economic stressors have on someone developing an infectious disease, diabetes, or hypertension in that atmosphere. There's medicine in that too. You have a responsibility in that too. As you can see, the point of our education at ELAM is that medicine must go beyond hospitals. No greater lesson for us is important, especially in the time that we live in now and all that we suffer being from marginalized communities, oppressed communities. This is a lesson that we learn time and time again in our Cuban context, that we must be trained as doctors of science and conscience in order to come out into the world wherever we're needed and to serve. So now I'll go into the next slide. You may be wondering who can join this mission and who is eligible to train in this revolutionary approach to medicine. And the truth is that the criteria is pretty simple. You should be a US citizen, a high school graduate. You don't have to take the MCAT. You need to be at least proficient in college level sciences with at least a B average in these specific sciences: biology for a full year, general chemistry, physics, organic chemistry, all for a full year with their lab components. And you should be between the ages of 18 to 25 years of age when you apply. We do make exceptions for those who are over the age of 25, but no older than 30 years old. And you also, most importantly, need to be committed to practicing medicine in poor and underserved communities in the US and the world after graduation. Those are the basic requirements. And so for us to understand our calling and to fulfill that calling, we have to connect with our communities and stay connected in our work. So now we'll go over some of what we learn in Cuba that makes us stand out. Oh, I jumped ahead. So some of the things that the scholarship covers, it's important to note that the scholarship covers tuition and fees. You have access to a dorm room and boarding is covered. You're given meals 3 times a day. You have some basic school supplies as the revolution is able to afford. You are given uniforms as well. And you're given textbooks in Spanish, but currently those textbooks are in digital format most of the time. as opposed to in our day when we were physical hard copy textbooks. And then you're also given a modest monthly stipend. But that is all within the context of what Cuba can offer. Cuba is not a rich country, so everything that it's giving us is not what is left over, but what it can share. And that it comes at a huge sacrifice for the Cuban people. What is not covered in this scholarship is airfare and travel expenses to Cuba, and your personal expenses, any money that you may need to supplement what you're given through the stipend, because the stipend is not a lot. And because we're in a socialist country where education is guaranteed and is considered a human right, it is not the norm to have students work while they're studying. So that is not something we're able to do while in Cuba. We are supposed to be supported to fully commit ourselves to learning while we're there. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's a little bit about the curriculum and what we learn in the 7-year program. It is 7 years mainly because there is a first year that is where you are offered 6 months of intensive Spanish language training for those of us who do not speak Spanish before applying into the program. And then the next half of the year, about 4 months of pre-med coursework in Spanish that reinforces basically what we are coming into the program with a knowledge of, and equalizing the field because we're coming from so many different educational systems around the world. That pre-med year and that pre-med semester helps us all stay on the same page. And then the first and second year of medical school are focused on your preclinical basic medical sciences. And I've listed some of the courses that we learn in those years. It's important to note that from your first year until your final year in this program, public health exposure, community medicine exposure, and practice is incorporated in all of these years, which is very different from what students may be used to in the US context or elsewhere. So we get to be in the community and learn from the family doctors and nurses from our first year. The 3rd through 5th year are your clinical rotations. That's when we are sent to teaching hospitals and we spend our days rounding and taking care of patients in whichever rotation that we fall in at that time. And then our final year is the 6 years of rotational internship in the United States. That used to be a practice in medical school, but now the internship is part of residency. It's the first year of residency. So we do that in Cuba in our final year of medical school. And we rotate in the basic, the core rotations being internal medicine, general surgery, obstetrics and gynecology, pediatrics. And we also, once again, rotate again, especially in family medicine, which in Cuba is known as Medicina General Integral. It is a huge component of our learning in Cuba. And upon completion, we sit for a national medical exam. And then once we pass, we are conferred a degree of doctor in medicine. So now that I have explained what it takes to apply to ELAM as the program coordinator, I will segue a bit into my own personal story about why I chose ELAM. The origins of our journeys shape who we become. My passion for medicine was sparked in my childhood in Ghana, where my parents' service to humanity left a lasting impression on me. My father worked in disaster relief, bringing aid to communities devastated by floods, landslides, and even war. He had traveled to Guinea-Conakry when I was little to help resettle refugees fleeing from war in Sierra Leone and Liberia. And my mother, through her advocacy, fought for girls' education in Muslim communities and used art to uplift youth, culminating in the first ever performance of Muslim children on Ghana's national television. So from them, I learned that service to humanity is not just a profession, it is a calling. Yet my parents never dictated my path, only that it should be meaningful. I was drawn to medicine, but I wanted to practice it in a way that aligned with my values. At age 15, I learned about Cuba's medical scholarship at ELAM, which trains doctors to serve where they are needed most. I knew that when I wanted to study in Cuba, a nation that understands healthcare as a human right and not a privilege, it was clear to me. But under the Bush administration, travel restrictions blocked my opportunity when I graduated high school. So I waited, preparing myself, studying healthcare, engaging community work, and deepening my understanding of global injustice. When the door reopened, I applied and was accepted. ELAM did not just train me as a doctor, it transformed my approach to medicine. I learned that healthcare must center the community, that prevention is more powerful than profit-driven treatment, and that true medicine goes beyond hospital walls. I studied disaster medicine, public health, traditional healing, all tools to challenge the systems that perpetuate poor health. Today, I use my medical degree beyond the clinical space. As the scholarship program coordinator at IFCO Passes for Peace, I advocate, mentor, and raise awareness about global health, climate change, and the injustices of economic sanctions. While many ELAM graduates heal with a stethoscope, I work to dismantle policies that create suffering in the first place, because healing communities takes many forms. Medicine is not just about treating illness, it is about dismantling the systems that create it. So we say, this is why ELAM is so important. It's about decolonizing medicine and decolonizing resistance. Decolonizing medicine requires promoting existing alternative models. Cuban doctors do not prove their expertise by listing elite institutions or corporate affiliations. They prove it through action, their medical missions, their service to the dispossessed, their willingness to go where others refuse. ELAM was founded not for prestige, but to train those who the world had written off, to create doctors with both scientific knowledge and a strong conscience. My brothers and sisters, comrades, we stand at a critical juncture. The forces of imperialism, exploitation, and repression are tightening their grip, using war, strangulation by economic means, and propaganda to dismantle movements and crush the spirit of those who dare to resist. But we are not powerless. We have tools, we have lessons, and we have the wisdom of those who came before us. To push through the next decade of imperialist terror, we must embrace Sankofa, Sumud, and solidarity, three guiding principles rooted in our struggles. Sankofa, from the Ghanaian tradition, teaches us to look to our past to move forward. The blueprint for liberation is already within us, written in the revolutions that defied colonial rule, in the sacrifices of those who fought for justice before we were even born. History does not repeat itself, it instructs. Sumud, the Palestinian principle of steadfastness, reminds us that resilience is our weapon. The Palestinian people have faced ethnic cleansing, apartheid, and genocide for decades, yet they refuse to disappear. They resist with their very existence, with their culture, their olive trees, and their unwavering spirit. Sumud is the ability to stand firm in the face of destruction and declare, we are still here and we are not leaving. Solidarity, especially solidaridad a la cubana, teaches us that resistance cannot exist in isolation. Cuba has shown the world that true solidarity is not just words, it is action. It is sending doctors, not bombs. It is standing with oppressed nations even when the empire threatens you. It is knowing that the liberation of one people threatens the liberation of all. We need all three. Without Sankofa, we will lose our way. Without Sumud, we will surrender. Without solidarity, we will stand alone. Imperialism thrives on division, on erasing our history, on breaking our will, and isolating our struggles. But together, we can dismantle its power. Together, we can build a future where no nation, no people, and no movement is left to fight alone. So with that being said, remember, Sankofa, Sumud, solidarity, these are our weapons. Let's use them. Let's use them. Venceremos, free Palestine, end the blockade on Cuba, and power to the people. With that, I will now introduce the next speaker, which is a great ELAM graduate, Dr. Jontay Darko. She is a Chicago native, graduate of the Chicago Public School System, Olive Harvey College, DePaul University, and the Latin American School of Medicine, ELAM, in Havana, Cuba. She says she chose to go to ELAM because she was fascinated about Cuba's ability to give doctors to the world and provide healthcare for all with such limited resources. Prior to going to medical school, she worked as a licensed practical nurse, an LPN, and a registered nurse. Jontay completed a family medicine residency at University of Illinois, Chicago, in Chicago. And currently she works as a hospice physician and volunteers at the Norma Jean Sanders Free Clinic in the Kenwood neighborhood. Please welcome Dr. Jontay Darko.
Hi, everyone. So essentially, I was going to say the same thing that Samira just said. So basically, I am a Chicago native, born and raised. As she said, I graduated from Chicago Public Schools, Bryn Mawr Elementary, Whitney Young High School. And while I was in high school, I participated in a practical nursing program. So it was a part-time nursing program, junior and senior year, so that by the time I graduated, I became a licensed practical nurse. I went to college at DePaul University, and I actually majored in early childhood education because at that time, the thought process was, well, you don't necessarily have to major in science, which I did not want to do. Major in something you would do if you didn't do medicine. And I had some teaching experiences. I said, you know what, I'll be a teacher if I don't become a doctor. So after that, I studied abroad in Mexico for quite some time in Merida, Mexico. I also took some Latin American history courses while I was in high school and started to learn about Cuba. And I was just intrigued, like, how could this developing nation do all of these things? How can they educate people to the point that they have no illiteracy? How can they have a healthcare system that treats everyone regardless of who they are and where they come from? How could this be possible? Especially, you know, living in Chicago, growing up in South Shore, Hyde Park, and Inglewood, and seeing that that wasn't the case here. I was just very intrigued. And then eventually my church went to Cuba for a mission trip. We actually went to Santiago de Cuba and spent maybe a week there working with people at the churches. And one of the members of the church said, you know, because he knew I wanted to be a doctor, he's like, you should go to school here. And I was just like, okay, I should go to school in Cuba. But the thought kind of stayed there in Cuba. And then I started the process of taking the MCAT. The first time I took it, I didn't like my score and kind of sat on it. Didn't really seek assistance, tried to do things my own way. And then at the end of the day, I found out that my scores were okay to apply with. So essentially the process was going a little slow and here in the United States. And a member of my church, the First Baptist Church in Chicago, told me about the program in Cuba. And so I was like, okay, you know, should I do this? Let me think about it. And then one great day, I just woke up and I said, I'm going to medical school in Cuba. And the rest is pretty much history. It was a really great experience. Living in Cuba, no es fácil. It is not easy. It is a challenge for all of the reasons that have already been mentioned because of the blockade. But it truly makes you stronger. Going days without water, having to carry pails of water from the hospital to the room, learning how to make cakes on top of the stove, you know, just all of those things all of those things in summation have just made me such a better person. So much so that when I'm in the hospital, I'm able to think outside the box. Like, oh, okay, we don't have an IV pole because it's at the end of the night. And, you know, all the maintenance people and the people who are in charge of supplies aren't there. Okay, I know what to do. Give me that glove. I'm going to put the IV and I'm hanging on the light. You just figure things out. You're creative. And I really appreciate the creativity and the flexibility, which is super important in Cuba, that I've learned. In addition to that, I would say that the benefit of going to ELAM, outside of meeting people from all over the world and learning from people of different cultures and living with them, is also that, you know, like she said, it is a scholarship program. So now that I've graduated from residency, I can live life on my own terms. I can volunteer once a week at the Norma Jean Sanders Free Clinic, which is where I volunteered as a medical student, because I don't have to worry about paying someone. I don't have to, you know, change my life goals or my belief system to work out of necessity. You know, I work where I want to work, when I want to work there, you know, and I I'm just thankful for the Cuban Revolution, to the Latin American School of Medicine, and for IFCO, Pastors for Peace, the Reverend Lucius Walker and Ellen, and all those who have made my education possible. And I think that's pretty much it. And if you have questions, you can always send an email.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jontay. And now we have Dr. Christine Knight, a graduate of ELAM from 2019. They finished at St. Mary Family Medical Residency Program in 2023. Christine is a family physician and gender affirming care clinical lead for Prime Care Health. They chose ELAM seeking a medical education that was based in a system that practiced people and community-centered care to promote health, and not profit-centered care to treat illness. So let's welcome Dr. Christine.
Hello all. I want to start by saying that I'm so grateful to be here with you all, and thank you so much to everyone who continues to spread the word about ELAM, but also continues to do the great works that they're doing in their communities. I am a person, I grew up on the south side of Chicago and then eventually in a south suburb of Chicago. I am from a quite isolated as a young person, like Irish and Irish American community. So, you know, growing up, I did have a keen sense of international like solidarity in terms of liberation movements, but very much as a young person, it was specifically rooted within the Irish experience, which I very gratefully, as I continued to move through life, and I eventually went to Urbana-Champaign for university and then moved to LA and spent 4 years there. That kind of lens became quite more intersectional, and I started to, especially rooted within like queer and trans community, I started to expand the concept of, you know, what liberation can look like, and that survival is something that, you know, if we come together and rebuild that, we can build a world where we can all flourish and not just survive. And that's kind of, that lens started to become rooted in how and when I became interested in medicine. I was working for years as a nurse assistant, and it was actually a friend who was studying medicine at Morehouse School of Medicine who told me about ELAM. I think at that point I knew that I wanted to seek medicine as a skill to bring back to community, and something that I wanted to be a very like liberatory skill set that could be used for the community. And so I knew going into studying medicine, and I'm very grateful for that, that I did not want to study medicine in a system that would put profit over people. And I knew that I wanted to study in a system that prioritized health and not healthcare. So I learned about ELAM, and it seemed like quite an exceptional match. And so I think we have heard many stories about Cuba's medical training system, but I will say that I think some things that really stood out for me was the fact that the training in Cuba is very much a community-based training. While we're working there, we're learning not only about, you know, we did study in a school that's an international school, and so we studied with students from hundreds of, you know, over 100 different countries. And so we're learning not only about the sense of like health and illness and offering care and healing from those multiple perspectives, but we're also actually learning the skill set of a community assessment. We're learning skill sets of integrating public health and preventative health into our training. And that's something that I think we sadly can all see we, struggle a lot with in our communities here. And so I think that both the focus on that component of actually offering prevention before illness and seeing illness or seeing health not just as the absence of illness, I think really was the lens that I needed to go into studying medicine. But then, like I said, we also learned from so many of our colleagues from all around the world. And so I think that we started to actually understand through storytelling and through shared lived experiences what folks experience growing up, especially the majority of our colleagues at the hands of US imperialism within their countries. And so I think that we got to understand those stories in a way that was extremely intimate. And I think that that's something that I have taken back with me, one, to better understand the folks that I work with, but and also my community within Chicago, but two, to also understand that if we are actually trying to build a healthy society, that we can't ignore the societal illnesses that exist around us. And, we can talk about that over and over again, but I think when you are actually in a space and you are learning that with your colleagues through someone that you love and struggle alongside, I think that understanding of history is different. And I think that became so essential to the formation of myself as someone who wants to continue working in healthcare. And so, and I do want to say that that included, as you saw, our brothers and sisters from Palestine. We have brothers and sisters from Congo. We have people from throughout the world who we are now seeing like extreme crisis in their struggles for liberation and their struggles for autonomy and survival. And so, yeah, with all of that, I think that to me, it only makes sense if you want to use healthcare or like health and medical training as a tool for societal change. And if you want to bring that back into whatever community you're from, I think ELAM is an exceptional experience for that. And the way that I'm coming back, I'm at a FQHC, like Samira very kindly explained. I'm at Prime Care Health on the west side of Chicago. We do community-based primary care, but again, as we all know, community-based is something that looks very different here than it does in Cuba. I'm very grateful because I also trained in lifestyle medicine. So I am trying to take so much of what I learned in Cuba to bring that into what we are now trying to build in terms of creating shared medical appointments and group visits, starting walking groups. We're starting crocheting groups. We're just trying to create safe space of connection and healing and storytelling and continuing, so much of what ELAM has gifted to myself, but gifted to really all of the US in the form of the graduates from the ELAM project, and hopefully continue to gift to the US. And so I also want to say that I'm very grateful that I also have been a part of the team to start and continue our gender affirming care projecting at Prime Care. This is something that I also want to say was extremely moving to see in Cuba, in a country that prioritizes trans and non-binary healthcare with full access to hormone care, with full access to gender affirming surgery. I got to learn in a system back in 2012, which we did not have access to that. And I had friends going to different countries and even coming to visit me in Cuba for that care. So I want to give that foundation also an important recognition, because I think that Cuba has been a country that, I think evolved and fought very hard for that care. And I think continues to fight hard for that care, even as we see that change and threat to that care in our country right now. So I want to say that I am so grateful for my experience. I am very open to talking to anyone about that. I encourage any young person to continue that journey if that's right for them. But I think that we can all say that our health infrastructure is changing extremely positively because of the ELAM project. And I'm extremely grateful to ELAM, to the Cuban Revolution. I'm grateful to IFCO for sharing that and for continuing to grow solidarity, even with a country that continues to tear down their infrastructure and their society. So let's all continue our great work, and thank you so much, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Christine. And now we have the pleasure of having Ayman Salhab, third year ELAM medical student. Ayman is a Palestinian-American from Tampa, Florida community. He studied cellular and molecular biology at the University of South Florida, where he also advocated for Palestinian liberation as a student organizer with the Students for Justice in Palestine. Currently, he is in his third year of medical school at the Latin American School of Medicine, ELAM, in Cuba. So welcome, Ayman.
Thank you, Samira. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, so I'm in my third year here in ELAM, Cuba. I mean, now I'm at the hospital, so on the other side in Havana. But I mean, basically, it comes down to, I guess, the question of why I went to ELAM, and it always circles around to the same. I mean, everybody comes here for different reasons, and everybody has their way of seeing things. And personally, I was in a place where I was studying cellular molecular biology and at USF, the University of South Florida, at the time, and I was reading a lot about the medical field. I was reading a lot about revolutions. I was reading a lot about society, and a lot of those books usually came around about Cuba, what Cuba did, how Cuba did it, what society needs, and what society needs to do to move forward. And I was very, I found myself kind of lost at USF, looking at the way how health was moving, how research was moving, how it could be falsified, and how it can be used and again for profit. And that was something that I had became in a way very against. And so I had to look into other options where I could learn what I needed to do to learn. And I also, so when it came to that point, Cuba seemed like one of the best options. So I said to myself, how do I get there? And I think it was through Twitter, actually. There was a post that said, oh, there's this program, which is IFCO, Pastores por la Paz, that sent students over to Cuba to study medicine. And so that was something that I had to look into, see if I wanted to separate away from my family. And, just knowing about the reputations that the Cuban doctors have, reading about them, knowing about what they do under the limited circumstances in the blockade that they live against, it was something that I had seen also because I'm also Palestinian. And when I would return to Palestine, there was always the same questions that needed to be met. How are Palestinians able to access healthcare? And if they're able to access healthcare, what type of restrictions will we have to go through? And not only that, is that there's also a impeding factor of liberation in the Palestinian people. So when the liberation does come, how does their medical field move from that point on? So that was things that really played into my head, and it seemed like at that point the Cuba was the best way to go. And you study with people all around the world. You study with people from Yemen. You study from people from Palestine from different parts. People from Gaza, people from Jenin, people from Khalil. All different types of cities. You learn all different type of things. You learn different types of perspectives. You learn different types of obstacles people had went through, and it's just amazing what people come from, what people don't have, and what people need to progress and move forward. And that's, I mean, it's a beautiful gift to learn and understand. And I mean, I recommend it to any U.S. student that would like to come, or I mean, anybody in the world that would like to come, because, like I said, Cubans have some have skills, have knowledge that books, videos, or images won't even be able to teach you. They have experience, and that's something that a lot of people don't have back in the United States, where experience, physical, clinical, societal, going out to the community, being able to observe, looking at houses, looking at looking at food, looking at the food in the streets. These are all important things that one needs to see if they want to be one of the best doctors or one of the good doctors that can go back to their community and help. But I mean, what else? Was there more on that slide?
No, I think you covered everything. You talked about hands-on experience and all the different things you learned.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, also Cuba, like I said, I came to Cuba to understand more about how the world functions, how the world was put into this place, how a country like Cuba was able to develop their medical field, and how it continues to go forward. Studying with people, for example, from Niger, which is in Africa. Is a country, for example, I had a friend telling me a story that how people just are able to lose their life easily because of they're not able to access a machine such as a blood pressure machine, or having to go to a doctor, which they have to pay to get their blood pressure just to be read, to be taken. And that's something, for example, I had a friend that had lost their dad recently to renal failure, which also comes from a complication of hypertension, and just not being able to access a machine as easy or as accessible in the United States as a blood pressure machine in their country is something that mind boggles me. And when
Cuban moments. But Ayman has another slide, I believe. So if you can go to the next slide, that'll help guide him. Yeah, thank you. And in the interim, yes, it's true. I believe a lot of what we learn in Cuba makes us realize from living with our comrades from different places that the basic things we take for granted, especially being exposed to the Cuban environment where there's a Cuban a medical doctor and a nurse on each block, is not the reality in most of where we come from. And I was just thinking the other day, I was in Cuba and I was listening to we were just having a regular conversation among friends, and our Cuban comrades were mentioning how, you know, they know what the difference, they know not to call the stomach the boca del estómago, which is the epigastrium. They know not to call it that. And an everyday person in the US does not know what the epigastric area is in the stomach, but that's Cuban know that. An everyday person doesn't know what hemorrhaging is, but a Cuban probably has heard that. So that's all part of the revolutionizing of medicine and healthcare accessibility in Cuba, making it so that the everyday person has a vocabulary that's way advanced and an understanding of health that is very advanced compared to where we come from. So coming back to the States, we find that we have to really start from the basics, building blocks. And that's part of the work that we are trying to do in being a part of this process, training ourselves at ELAM and coming back, is that it's supposed to fulfill what Che, you know, predicted and wanted, which is medicine becoming revolutionary medicine, which would be accessible everywhere to the common man and woman, to the new man and woman of the future. And so in order to make that happen, we have to train in a system that understands that we have deeper challenges than just the lack of a hospital building or high-tech gadgets like a CT scanner or an MRI scanner. We have basic needs that are not being met, and a basic level of health literacy that we have to tackle in order to build up to creating a real preventative system. So I don't want to take away from Ayman, he's back, but Ayman, you have your next slide that was going to talk about your future goals and your Palestine-Cuba connection.
Yeah, like I was just trying to connect that all together, telling you guys the story of how a person doesn't have access to a blood cupping machine, and that's comes partially due to the hegemony that the United States holds on technological advancements such as chip makers. And chip makers are important for creating high-tech computers that are needed for doing high-tech research, for especially diagnostic on patients. And for example, I don't know if you guys know the story during the time of COVID when Cuba was able to create their own ventilator due to the restrictions placed upon them. And you have to understand that the ventilator in this time was an important piece of instrument that was needed to help save countless lives. And just for them to be held back is criminal on part of the United States. And the United States doesn't care about any of that. But so what comes to my future goals is trying to bridge the gap between technology and medical health, creating tools that are accessible to low-income hospitals. This is something that is still a thought that goes through my head every day, but you have to learn medicine in order to create these type of things, because you have to understand how the body works, you have to understand how it can be seen, how it can be, but that's beside the point. And yeah, the Palestine-U.S.-Cuba connection, I covered this a little bit throughout my. It's just Cuba has a whole bunch of has solidarity with Cuba has solidarity with Palestine for since ELAM was founded, sending doctors here, sending medical students from Palestine, from Gaza, from all over, like I told you, from the Khalil, from Jenin, from all different parts of Palestine to come here and study medicine, where they can then return back and continue on to do their duties, to serve their communities. And these blockades have there's similar blockades on Cuba as there is in Palestine. There's more on Gaza than there is in the West Bank, but they serve these same type of goals to keep the people oppressed, keep them limited in their technological gain and their medical gain to help their community so they can be oppressed to the point where, at the end of the day, like, we can see, like, towards the end, that as Cuba remains strong and still creating doctors, and Palestine keeps on resisting, like Samira said, you need solidarity, and you need what was the word that you used, Samira?
Sankofa.
To keep on this resilient nature, to keep on pushing and creating change that needs to be done inside your communities. And that's something that and at the end of the day, I mean, this is why I chose this program, and this is why I think this program fits for me, and why I have uttermost thanks to IFCO, to Cuba, and everyone that made this program possible.
Right on, Ayman. Thank you so much. I'm sure you inspired many, and the young ones who are in that seat that we were in a few years ago wondering, can I do this? Your contributions will continue to help people see that there is a light, and we are the light, so they should apply to ELAM. So with that, we'll move on to the next segment, which is Q&A.
Right. So there are 3 people on stack right now. Aaliyah, Kareem, you're up first.
Hello. It's actually Aaliyah's right here. I'm Kevin Bresswell. We could just have one name on the Google. But a thank you to all the speakers for sharing your experiences of learning at ELAM, and specifically where you came from before, whether it's in Gaza or in the US. I'm a nurse here in Canada, And I was wondering what opportunities there are, if not to go to ELAM to become a doctor, because I'm older, but to support the work of the Cuban medical service, and maybe to volunteer or like learning exchanges for those of us who are in the nursing profession. A lot of us here in Canada are very touched by the work Cubans did during COVID-19. We're both of Guyanese heritage. Cuban doctors are well represented there, with nearly every doctor being trained in ELAM. So we'd like to know what we can do to participate in Cuban medical internationalism, and of course to support the great work you're doing at ELAM and training so many wonderful doctors.
Thank you so much, Aaliyah, and I didn't catch your name, I'm sorry.
Kevin.
Kevin, thank you all for joining us, and much love to you for being in the healthcare field. Yes, Guyana is a country that definitely sends lots of students to be trained in Cuba. There's a long history there of solidarity. I believe that question of incorporating professionals into Cuban internationalist project may be more apt for Dr. Jose Villamarin to answer, if possible. That is not something that we've encountered so far in our work as IFCO Pastors for Peace, people who want to do the medical brigade work along with Cubans, but I think that's an excellent idea. So does Dr. Jose have an answer, or do we table it to get back to you guys?
Oh, yes. Well, oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I will try to I will try to answer. Well, the history of the internationalism of the Cuban Medical Brigade started in 1960 in Chile, but officially we recognized in 1963 in Algeria. We have been working in many countries worldwide, and including the emergency situation that we have been facing: Ebola, natural disasters as earthquake, hurricanes, and others. Usually we go as a brigade, as a medical team, including nurses and other technologists, the technician, and we go to offer our help to different countries that need. But officially, the cooperation, bilateral cooperation between countries, is through an agreement that is signed between the countries, the authority of the country, or the government, both government or both ministries. I'm talking about the normal bilateral cooperation, but of course, there's I think could be great because there are a lot of experience where the Cuban medical doctors has been sharing the same place, providing medical care to other people, together with other specialists from health professionals for other countries. That's why I think it's possible. In any case, if some of you have any interest in that cooperation, that type of cooperation, you can address to the embassies in different countries where you are. Then you can ask about the possibility, the opportunity, even not only for the cooperation together with the Cuban medical teams. You could do it you could ask to the authorities of the embassies about the possibility to study in Cuba. No, we have different programs, not only the ELAM, Pastor for Peace. That is very important program for us, of course, but we have another program that scholarship and others that we could ask to the embassies, the Cuban embassies in different countries. I'm not sure if it was possible for me to answer the question, but that's the information that I can provide at this moment.
Thank you, Doctor. You did answer the question. In solidarity.
Thank you for your question, Kevin. Next up, we have Nora.
Yes, hi. Sorry, I'm calling from work. But I just thank you all so much for your time and putting this talk on. And I kind of basically came to my journey of deciding my interest in medicine and healthcare when I was a little too old for ELAM, and I have a similar question to Kevin. So a little bit just adding on to that, if there's like any, I mean, you kind of answered it, but interested in like healthcare delegations for learning and just like education exchange. But if that is not something that is like an officially if there's no programs around this formally, I'm really curious if there are resources that you would recommend studying or seeking out being based in the US, just to like kind of learn more about healthcare and medicine through this ethos, because it is very hard to find, and it obviously is not like institutionalized. And just yeah, if there's any resources out there that you'd recommend, that's my question. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Nora. That's an excellent question. And one of the other projects that IFCO works on is taking down delegations. So if you want to be a part of a healthcare targeted delegation for information exchange, research, that kind of thing, we'd be happy to work with you. The idea is to have at least 10 people sign up for these kind of group delegations. So aside from yourself, if there are other people who are interested in that kind of thing, we can set up a delegation to visit Cuba and target the specific areas that you may have interest in. So looking forward, please feel free. My email is Samira, Samira, at ifconews.org. It's also in the chat. Feel free to reach out to me so that we can talk further about that.
Thank you for your question, Nora.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, and our last question for this section is from Allie. And remember, everyone, there's another opportunity for Q&A shortly. So Allie, please come off mute and ask your question.
Yes, hello, everybody. My name is Ali. I'm doing my pre-medical classes right now, and I work as a medical scribe in the healthcare field. So I've known about ELAM for like a year or so. I'm interested in like war surgery, serving in conflict areas like Palestine, Iraq, Syria, Yemen. And I know that ELAM's like focus is on primary care. But it also appeals to me because of the social justice aspect and the liberation medicine aspect. And so I'm wondering, have there been any ELAM graduates who have gone on to surgery residencies? And of course, it's very competitive to match into, but I'm wondering about that experience because it's an amazing program. And also thank you to all the speakers, of course. So yeah, that's my question.
Awesome. Thank you, Ali. And kudos to you for doing the work that you're doing right now in order to pursue medicine. Yes, ELAM graduates have matched into surgery. However, the caveat is that because it is super competitive, most of them, it was at least 5 that I can count off the top of my head, that matched into surgery and then changed back into a primary care specialty because they found through experience that by the time that they had started the program, their colleagues were at a different level kind of in terms of their exposure to those particular programs and to the specialties. So that's not to say that it's impossible. People have matched into it successfully, but the option to stay in has become a personal choice. And sadly, some folks opted not to pursue surgery. And I'm only talking about stateside. Now, there are, however, 2 examples of ELAM graduates that stayed in Cuba and did a surgical residency in Cuba and have opted to use their surgical skills in different arenas, not limited to the US space. So there's different ways that you can manifest your dreams. But again, it's about your personal plan and what you want to do. But we always encourage people to pursue their dreams and not to feel encumbered. Just because most of us go into primary care does not mean we don't want to have surgeons in our midst, because we need trusted people that we can refer our patients to in case they need surgery. So the more of us who are trained in other subspecialties, the better for us to create a solid network. So I would encourage you to continue to keep Cuba in mind.
Thank you, everyone, for your questions. For those of you who came in late, my name is Dr. Howard Ehrman. I'm the moderator along with other people for today's event. Just want to tell folks who raised this question. This year, from April 26th to May 4th, or from April 26th to May 11th, we are taking a new brigade directly to Santiago de Cuba for May Day. And this brigade will be working directly with MINSAP, public health people in Santiago de Cuba for at least 3 days to go door to door to really understand the community care basis for how Cuba does its work. So I'll put more information in the chat. If you want to reach out, be happy to talk to you about it. Right now, we're very, very honored and happy to have with us Dr. Jose Arronte Villamarin, who is the International Organization Director of the Cuban Ministry of Health, which is MINSAP in Spanish. Dr. Arronte Villamarin has led multiple Cuban health missions around the world, including in Jamaica, Vietnam, Egypt, and Chicago, where he was the lead physician working on maternal and infant health in 2017 with several of us at the University of Illinois for 5 months. Dr. Villamarin, thank you for joining us directly from Cuba.
Howard, do you not want the video to be played anymore?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. The video should go first. I apologize.
Yes.
Another early morning, another ceremony to bid health workers farewell. Last week, a troop of Cuban doctors were dispatched to Italy. This week, medical professionals have been sent throughout the Caribbean, to Suriname, Grenada, Jamaica, and today, St. Kitts and Nevis. 29,000 Cuban doctors and nurses are working in 59 countries around the world. And as confirmed cases of coronavirus increase, so does demand for Cuban medics. Medical services are the island's main export, raising more than $6 billion for the state in 2018. But the communist-ruled island doesn't charge for the thousands of doctors who work in more than a dozen low-income countries in Latin America and Africa. The same goes for disaster relief, where Cuban physicians have provided emergency assistance to millions. Almost 1,000 Cuban doctors arrived in Haiti after the 2010 earthquake, where they were the first to set up medical facilities amid the rubble.
More than 12,000 people were willing to fight Ebola, and right now there are thousands of Cubans willing to complete these missions.
While Western commentators assume Cuba sends doctors mainly to expand influence, experts on the island's health system draw a different conclusion.
The root of it, in addition to Cuba's own health system, which provides universal coverage and universal access, is really the belief that Cuba is one of a number of developing countries that is trying to make life better for its population.
From the moment we're born in this country, we receive an education based on humane principles. The principle of solidarity and internationalism is at the forefront of that. This isn't about politics or ideology, it's about humanity.
You're making a big sacrifice. Why are you willing to go?
Because there are other people that need me, people that are sick and dying, and that isn't right. People shouldn't be dying when there are people who can help them.
Ed Augustin, Al Jazeera, Havana.
Doctor José, ya se puede presentar.
Okay. Well, good afternoon for everyone. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure for me just to be here today, sharing some idea of about Ministry of Health, public health in Cuba, my humble experience providing medical care to other countries. Thank you, Dr. Howard. Thank you, Samira. Thank you, Levántate por Cuba, Pastor for Peace, and the ELAM graduates and the students, of course. and all the people that I want to share with you some ideas about the national health system in Cuba. Well, the first of all, next, I want to talk about the principles of the national health system in Cuba. It's very important because to say that, of course, all the medical doctors and other health professionals that has been graduating in Cuba knows very well. They know very well the health system in Cuba. But just for the rest of the people that are connected today, well, I want to say that the most important for the government of Cuba is the health of the people, and the principles of the national health system is universal, regionalized, intercentral, promotional, preventive, accessible, free of charge. As you know, I'm talking about the graduated. You do with a very important internationalist conception. Those principles are the healthcare of the people in Cuba is based on the Article 72 of the Constitution of the Republic of Cuba. That is said that it's a state responsibility, and the most important is the health of the people. And it's possible for you to the accessibility, no matter the religion, the sex, the political affiliation, or the money that you have in your pocket. Next. Next, please. Okay. Well, what was the situation in 1959 at the triumph of the Cuban Revolution? We had in Cuba at that moment more than around 6,000 medical doctors, most of them working in the large city, not at the rural areas, and 50% of them left the country after the victory of the revolution. On that moment, we have only one school of medicine, and at the end of the 2023, we have in Cuba more than 80,000 medical doctors. The relation of the medical doctor is 8 per 1,000 inhabitants. It's still one of the highest in the world. And next. And as I said, only one medical school, but we have at this moment 30 medical school, 27 faculty of medical sciences, and the level of the health system in Cuba: primary health care level, secondary and tertiary level. On the primary health care, we have more than 11,000 medical doctors' office. You know, the program of the family medicine program. There's a medical doctor and a nurse, and we have the polyclinic. We have in Cuba more than 450 polyclinics currently. At the secondary level, we have the hospitals. In Cuba, we have 151 hospitals. And the tertiary level, we have the research institute with the 12 research institute. That's but one of the most important things is the patient touch the health system at the tertiary level, but he needs to go to the primary level. The own system move the patient through and then receive the attention at the level that he needs. Next, please. As I said before, 30 medical sciences university, 29 faculty of medicine. Remember, at the end in 1959, we have had only one medical school in Cuba, in Havana, of course. And the Latin American School of Medicine is I felt real proud the feelings today. Meanwhile, you were talking about the experience, your experiences in Cuba, and the student, Dr. Ayman, that is currently at the third year of the medicine at the ELAM school, and the National School of Public Health. that we have in Cuba. The teaching staff in more than 32,000 professors and more than 120,000 students of pre and post grade at this moment. Next. Well, the main indicator has been able that's possibility of the different medical schools, that number of medical doctors and nurses and dentists. The life expectancy is 77.1 years. Well, we have before COVID, we have 79.48, but after COVID, you know, the damage that the COVID-19 pandemic caused to the people, and the medical coverage is 100% of the population, not only in the large city, even in the rural areas. Remains eliminated polio, diphtheria, tetanus of the newborn, whooping cough, measles, rubella, mumps, and others. The infant mortality was at the end of the last year, less than 1 year. It was 7.1 per thousand live birth. Remember that Cuba, before COVID, it was possible for us to get during 10 years, the infant mortality rate was lower than 5 per thousand live birth. The immunization coverage higher than 98%, with 11 vaccines, 8 of which are locally produced by our own industry, preventing certain diseases. And was Cuba the first country to receive in 2015 by the World Health Organization the certificate because it was possible to stop the HIV and congenital syphilis from mother to child transmission and eradication. And we still have this certificate, this condition. We keep this condition. Next, please. Well, as I said, some of the vaccines and the other drugs that we produce in Cuba is thanks to Cuba Pharma. It was we have the biotechnology industry with 45 enterprise, more than 110 production lines, 20 sciences and technology units, and more than 19,000 workers. Next, please. There is an integration between Cuba Pharma and the Ministry of Public Health. And as you mentioned before, we saw in the video, we produce, well, one of the most important things is the Cuban response to the COVID-19. During COVID-19, it was impossible for us to get the vaccines. And we produced 5 candidates that you know, Abdala, Mambisa, Soberana 01, Soberana 02, and Soberana. Then the 3 of them were approved by the regulatory authorities in Cuba, and it was possible for us to stop the transmission of the virus, and it was possible to save our people. But we produce innovative medicine like Everpro-P, that for the prevention of the amputation on the patient with a diabetic foot ulcer. More than 78% of the patient is possible to the prevention of the amputation. The Simavax is another drug very important for the prevention of the lung cancer, and we have others like Jubinsa that was produced during COVID-19. Let me tell you something. During COVID-19, more than 70% of the protocol drugs that we use were produced in Cuba, because but it was possible thanks to the constant search for cases, innovative medicine, clinical studies, attention to the vulnerable groups, and many other measures that we did during COVID-19. Next. Well, you remember the principles. One is the internationalist conception. Well, Cuba, the contribution to the improvement of health indicator of other countries, more than 305,000 collaborators health in 165 nations. graduated from other nationalities, pre-grade 42,000 and postgrade 9,000 of 150 countries. That's the contribution of Cuba to the health of other people worldwide. We have been working in Africa, Asia, Latin America, Caribbean island, and Europe, and even at the United States of America. Next, please. You know the Henry Reeve Brigade that was created in 2005 by the Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro Ruz. It's important. Just sorry for to take 1 minute more, 1 or 2 minutes, but I was part of that. I am Henry Reeve brigade member. I remember that we were in Cuba, in Havana, when the Hurricane Katrina affected the New Orleans city, and we were ready with more than 1,000 health professionals, medical doctors, nurses, and biomedical engineers, and others, and just to provide medical care to that people. And the government of the U.S. Didn't accept our help, and the Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro decided to create the Henry Reeve Brigade to provide the international cooperation to other countries. We have sent 89 brigades to 57 countries with 13,467 collaborators. 3 brigades faced Ebola in West Africa with 265 collaborators. When I say collaborators, I'm talking about medical doctors, nurses, as part of the brigade providing medical care. And 58 brigade faced the COVID-19 in 42 countries with more than 24,000 collaborators in 54 countries. Next. Well, that's it's impossible to talk about the cooperation, and with if I don't mention this, as Dr. Howard asked me about this, it was my personal experience with another 3 colleagues, Dr. Berta, Dr. Sonia, and Nurse Nemesis, that we were in 2017 building bilateral health solution, a government academic partnership to improve community health in Chicago. It was a partnership between the University of Illinois, Casson Center, and Cuba Ministry of Public Health to address maternal and child health inequities in Inglewood. Inglewood is a south side of Chicago neighborhood, African American community, and we have been visiting 50 houses and trying to apply, well, the medical doctor that had graduated of ELAM knows the health situation analysis that we use in Cuba, the doctor's offices, and then we make a different type of health situation analysis just to try to identify more causes of the high infant mortality rate. On that moment, I remember that was the infant mortality rate at the Inglewood community was like around 60 or 18 per 1,000 live births. It was three times more that the Cuban infant mortality rate, even the infant mortality rate in US as a country. Then. And for us, it was an amazing experience because we have the opportunity to ask to the women, African American women, and I remember some of them that say, "Please don't go back to Cuba because we need you. We need you. We need." This is the first time that a medical doctor come to my sitting room just to ask me about my health, about my pregnancy experiences, and others. And that's I have to say that that's a proof that it's possible the bilateral cooperation because the people needs, and then that is not a political situation, that is a human right, and then it's possible to do it. Next, please. Well, you know, everything that I've been talking about is under the economic, commercial, and financial blockade. The government of the United States speak to the world about the violation of the human right in Cuba. And when that happens, we have to think about the damage produced to our people by the inhuman blockade imposed by the government of the United States for so many years. Just to have an idea, the next, please. The accumulated damage for the caused by the blockade. Next, please. Just only for the Minister of for the health of the Cuban people, the accumulated damage is more than 3,894 millions of US dollars. In the last year, just only from 2023-2024, it was 268 million of US dollars. Can you imagine what we can do if we could be able to have that money for us and to support, to help many other people worldwide? That's the importance of that every day you have to stand with Cuba as part of the contribution to eliminate that inhuman blockade that is affecting our peoples. Next, please. Well, but despite that, Cuba ratified a willingness to protect the health and life of people as a priority, no matter how many obstacles we have to overcome to achieve that goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Dr. Jose Armando Arronte Villamarin. Just a segue to the next and last section, and then we'll be really happy to take more questions and comments. Having worked with Dr. Villamarin when he was in Chicago for 5 months, and the team who came with him, which was a maternal child health nurse and 2 other family physicians, was very similar to what we did in the first Rainbow Coalition with the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, the Young Patriots in Chicago. So we'd really encourage people to continue this conversation after this meeting of what we can do in the North and how we can basically work together with the people of Cuba. So we're going to watch 2 short videos and then we'll go into the next section.
This is a story about a vaccine, millions of people and billions of dollars. Question: what would happen if arguably the least likely source, or at least an underdog of global innovation, put the right scientific and medical minds together and as a result developed a vaccine that actually has the potential to eradicate the drain that lung cancer costs the global economy? That estimate is somewhere in the $200 billion zone. Think about it for just a minute. Could this vaccine actually change the health outcomes of nearly 1.8 million people who will be diagnosed with lung cancer just this year? To put that in perspective, that's enough people to fill Soldier Field in Chicago almost 30 times. 2017, just maybe the year that we can change the world, change the future of those impacted by a diagnosis of lung cancer, and help those that have the fewest resources. Because believe it or not, that vaccine already exists. And that least likely source, would you have guessed Cuba? It's called Simivax. It's inexpensive to produce, it's easy to administer, and best of all, it's proven. Roswell Park Cancer Institute in Buffalo, New York, one of the leading cancer research institutes on the planet, in conjunction with the Center for Molecular Immunology in Havana, are combining efforts to share it with the world.
We're grateful to Governor Cuomo for setting us on this path that led us to this historic collaboration with Cuba. This would not have happened without his vision and his historic trade mission.
Global Partnership for Global Change. This is a story about a vaccine. This
Luis Navarro is a Cuban who at 34 years of age has already suffered from chronic diabetes for the past 23 years. Recently, several ulcers have appeared on his foot, putting it at risk of being amputated. However, This has not happened thanks to a unique Cuban product, Hibaprot-P, a drug that has sparked acclaim for its effectiveness in controlling and healing diabetic foot ulcers. It contains epithermal growth factor, or EGF for short, as an active pharmaceutical ingredient, which, when applied by direct infiltration or injections into the wound, closes the ulcers in about 45 to 90 days.
Abismal el cambio con este medicamento que le dio, no pensé, lo veía por el televisor, pero en primera no pensé a tener nunca una lesión como es, pero viví en carne propia lo que se decía, ¿no? Porque lo anuncian que es más rápido, pero bueno, ya no fueron palabras, ya lo viví en carne propia. Ya le digo, en 20 días el pie, por lo menos arriba, es como si no hubiese tenido nada.
Before Cuban scientists created the drug, there were high rates of amputations in the Cuban diabetic community. However, in 2016, out of about 35,000 Cuban patients with diabetic foot ulcers, only 480 amputations were performed, thanks in part to the effectiveness of Hibaprot-P.
Indiscutiblemente que ha sido el advenimiento del producto una de los pasos reales, de los pasos verídicos que nos han llevado a que estas tasas de altas amputaciones mayores hayan disminuido en una forma bruta en los últimos 15 años, que hemos mejorado la calidad de vida de los pacientes y sobre todo la mortalidad.
Another benefit of the drug is that its application drastically reduces the resurgence of ulcers to just 5% of patients treated. Currently, Hibaprot-P is registered in 23 countries and is effectively being used in 10 that have already authorized its use and sale.
Thank you very much, and we're ready for the slides now. Thank you. This is a sign, I don't know if it's still there because I haven't been to Cuba since 2019, that was out in front of the Jose Marti International Airport for several years when you open the doors to leave the airport terminal and go outside. For those of you who don't read Spanish, it's about the blockade, and that the blockade is genocidal and the longest in history. Next slide, please. If you visit the Cuba Embassy in Washington, D.C., which we'd really encourage you to do if you're in that area, if you can't figure out how to get in there, one of the many people here, particularly the two co-chairs of NNOC who are in this meeting, can help you at least meet people. You'd be given a brochure that the National Network on Cuba helped create in 2019, where we said very specifically that this blockade is a two-way blockade against Cuba and the people of the United States. This is not an embargo. This is a blockade, and it meets the criteria of the 1948 UN Convention of Genocide. And if we can go on to the next slide. These are basically some of the criteria that are met, that of course have been met, not just since October 7th by the illegal Israeli government, but at least since 1917 with the Balfour Declaration in Palestine. This has been directly an attack on the Cuban people, an attack to cause one or more of all of these different parts of the 1948 genocide agreement. Next. How does this affect people in the United States? According to the last literacy census, which was done in 2013 under the Obama administration, there are 50 million to 55 million US-born residents who cannot read or write above a 5th grade level. That's not 5 million, that's 50 to 55 million. Cuba, beginning 25 years ago, started the world's largest literacy campaign in history, where at least 11 million people in 30 countries have gone through this literacy program, but this cannot be used in the United States. In fact, 20 years ago, people in New Mexico, Mexican Americans, tried to bring Yes I Can into the United States and were stopped by the US State Department. We just saw the video about Hibaprot-P. This year, there will be 85,000 US diabetic amputees. 75 to 80,000 would not need this if we could get Hibaprot-P. We can't because of the blockade. The ratio, like every other different health statistic you read, reflects racial inequities. African Americans, Latino Native Americans are 3 times more likely to have diabetic amputations than whites. You saw the thing about Simifax. It's been under study now for 8 years. It is possibly getting closer to being allowed to actually be used in the public in the United States. It's now in stage 2 in terms of the different stages it has to go through with the FDA. Don't hold your breath that it's going to be released during the Trump administration. That is not going to happen. 600,000 US lung cancer patients cannot get Simivax. This actually prolongs people's life. It doesn't totally cure lung cancer necessarily, but it definitely prolongs people's life, and the quality of life is much better. There are hundreds of agricultural and environmental innovations that Cuba has done since the revolution in 1959 that cannot be brought to the US. Just one comment to connect with Dr. Villamarin's presentation. Perhaps maybe the most important thing are the contributions that Cuba can make to the US regarding the massive racial inequities in maternal child health. Black women, particularly African-American women in the United States, are up to 6 times more likely to die before, during, or after childbirth than white women. This statistic has gotten worse since Dr. Villamarin and his 3 colleagues were in the US. Next. The answer is real simple, end the blockade. That's not going to be real easy to do, but it's something that's absolutely necessary for both the people and the country of Cuba, the beacon of light for the entire world, and the people of the United States. The only way we're going to do this is to really, really expand our movement way outside traditional leftist into civil society in the United States, using much of what we've talked about today, from ELAM to the contributions that Cuba can make inside the United States. So thank you very much, and look forward to your questions and comments.
All right, folks, this is an opportunity to raise your hand if you have a question or a comment for our speakers. I see Jason Jackson. Jason, feel free to come off mute. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, I'm Jason Jackson. I'm an MD PhD student here in St. Louis. Thank you so much to all of the speakers. One of the things that I've known about Cuba and ELAM and like the biotech, the phenomenal biotech for the last maybe like a couple years, and I always find it fascinating when I talk to my, I do cancer immunology, and I talk to my professors about it. And they're like in disbelief, and then I show them the papers and they're like, oh, wow. And actually one of my professors here, he's talking about how he's always trying to get the NIH to do preventative medicine, always trying to get them to do vaccine research, and he can never get people to take it seriously. And I could just see that there's a frustration. And when I tell people about Cuba, they're like in disbelief, and then they see, like I show them Simivax, they're like, wow. And I think a lot of people feel that profit-driven pharmaceutical industry and healthcare is wrong. And they would, like, I know a lot of people who might not be leftist, but would be so interested in learning more and sort of collaborating possibly with Cuban scientists. I just was wondering what sort of pathways there are for that. And then also, I'm telling young friends who are interested in both medicine and science about ELAM. I'm curious what opportunities at ELAM you have to participate in research. Thank you.
You want me to take it, Howard?
Oh, I think that that's a question for both Dr. Addrey and Dr. Arronte, Villamarin. So
yes.
Go ahead.
So thank you, Jason, for your question, and thank you for sharing that information as you've learned it with others to raise awareness about what Cuba has been doing. Number one, in terms of exposure of students to research community, at ELAM, most of our professors are not only physicians that have completed missions, but a lot of them are also working at several of these institutions, whether it's secondary or tertiary institutions. And so we can easily approach them if we're interested in learning more about the type of work that they're doing, helping them to translate some of the work that they're doing into English. Like that was one of the easiest ways to get involved and learn more about the work our Cuban profes were involved in, simply because we have an advantage. If we have English speaking abilities, we're able to help them in that capacity and get exposure to other things that they're doing, right? So Cuba is not like the US. You do not need to have your mama or daddy have a connection to somebody before you get to shadow or observe what a physician is doing. You know, expressing interest and being proactive is the key to you having access to all of these and more experiences. So I'll just leave it at that. And then maybe Dr. Villamarin has more to say on that end about formal opportunities for collaboration research-wise.
All right, Jason, thanks for your question. And we're gonna move, Jontay,
I'm
you're gonna
sorry.
answer?
Yeah, I would also say that as a student, as a third through a 6-year student, while we were in our teaching hospitals, students could elect to be alumnos ayudantes, which is basically like a teacher assistant. And in those positions, we are required to complete research projects that are unique. So at one point, I was in anatomy pathological alumni ayudante, and I was trying to figure out, is there a difference in terms of like the incidence and the mortality associated with breast cancer in Cuba versus the United States? So even as students, we have opportunities to do original research.
I think Dr. Villamarin was going to say something.
No, well, what I can say is that the student first, since the first year of the career, they are joined to the primary care level, healthcare level, and they start to do it to join to knock door by door to the families, and then that's how is to try to begin with them, with all of them, between the teachers, the professors, and the student, the feeling of the research, try to know about and the feeling of the community, community work, to work with the community and with the leader, and then it's possible to, and even at the doctor's office, we're trying to combine the medical assistance, the research, the administration, the managing of the and the teaching activity too. Then it's it's a combination of all these activities, and then in relation with the secondary level, as you say, Samira, with the hospital and even with the institute, and it's possible to, since the first years, even the student could participate at the scientific activities, even from the condition of a student together with the professor, but they could present some research at the level of the student, of course, but it's important. One of the most important is the health situation analysis that we talk about the health situation analysis. It's a very important research at the community level. That and then of course it's possible to maybe I could share through Dr. Howard or maybe Samira. I suppose that you have, but maybe I could share some possibility of cooperation that the Cuban medical services and others, different type of cooperation, and maybe it's possible to understand better what I am talking about, if it's possible. And maybe you could spread to the rest, you could send to the rest of the team.
That would be great. And just to add a little bit to what's been said by Dr. Villamarin and Dr. Jontay, it's important to know that the Cuban research and development sector dedicates over 60% of it towards therapeutic and vaccine research, as opposed to the R&D that is focused in big pharma. Big pharma does not have that proportion of dedication to preventative and therapeutic vaccine research, whereas Cubans are not doing research just to do it. They're doing it based on the problems that they find from these community health assessments that are carried out neighborhood by neighborhood. It's the questions are, the scientific and investigative questions are geared to answer those problems that come up in those community health assessments. So it's a different paradigm in terms of understanding why we do research and how we do research and for what we're doing the research for. And those are unique things that I think everybody would benefit from learning from Cuba. So I just wanted to end with that.
Yeah, thank you very much to both of you. Just to sort of segue on what both Dr. Villamarin and Dr. Addrey real quickly. Cuba is the only country in the world for decades that totally integrates public health, preventive medicine, and research. The Research Institute, as Dr. Villamarin can explain more in detail later, was established over 40 years ago by the leadership of Cuba, of course, including Comandante en Jefe Fidel Castro. What's happened is a lot of people want to go to Cuba for that research. It's really amazing, you know, or to go visit clinics and hospitals, which are also amazing, but under, of course, very dire conditions. What is very important is to put just as much emphasis on what Dr. Addrey said, that we really in the US have to learn how Cuba has created this model on the ground, house by house, block by block, where a doctor, a nurse, and often a health promoter go to each house literally almost every afternoon. And then that's where the research comes from. That's where the data, that's called collecting primary data, which has been lost in the United States the last 30 or 40 years. We rarely collect primary data. We look at secondary data that other people have created who are not like us. And the last thing I'll say is that a lot of people, even today in the left, take Dr. Ernesto Che Guevara's essay on revolutionary medicine, which was written 65 years ago, literally, and say, we can't do anything in the United States until we have a revolution. That's not what Che meant.
That's not what he meant.
It wasn't meant for the United States. It was meant for Cuba, Latin America. The Black Panther Party, the Young Lords, those of us in the Rainbow Coalition throughout the country, we proved that there were things that you could do in the US pending revolution. Those are called revolutionary reforms. So if you're interested in working on that, please get in touch with us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have 3 questions left. The next person is Lon Strouder. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Lon Strouder. I also go by Chris. I'm finishing my pre-med classes right now, and Dr. Samira actually let me know I can apply this year, so I'm very excited and frantically getting that together. So I guess my question is actually like sort of very tied to what Mr. Howard Ehrman said, because I'm wondering about, like, I've been daydreaming about like what happens like when I come back. And like right now, for example, I'm in the General Defense Committee and we're doing work with like tenants, trying to organize tenants unions because we have like a very brutal like landlord class here. And I'm thinking also about in like where I'm from originally, Flint, of like so many public health people say, oh, it kind of just happened, the lead crisis, it just kind of happened. But they don't talk about the history of disinvestment and profit motive and like racist, like just racism that caused that issue. And so I'm wondering how doctors come back and integrate yourselves in people's movements to fight those things, because like it's one thing to do the mission that we have here, which is to make healthcare accessible for all. But I'm really wondering, like, I want to not be like a professional like they do in the US, where it's like, I'm going to get my bag, I'm going to get my coin, I'm going to get my money. I want to like support those people's movements to fight, not just survive, but to fight against that kind of stuff. So I'm curious how doctors in here have integrated themselves in people's movements and like not just providing care, but like how do you do that? So thank you.
Dr. Christine, Dr. Jontay, excellent examples of what you're just asking. You guys want to share?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And I think that you're spot on. And I think that's like one I am so excited for you and for us all that you are interested in ELAM, because I think that studying in ELAM gives you that foundation to say, like, that is my role, similar to Lillian's quote that we saw in the presentation, right? That is the role of a physician in a community, is to be linked to people's movement and understand what, you know, patients and ourselves are going through in order to create a sense of like health for the being, but also the family, the community, right? So it's not just health isn't going to be isolated to that person in that clinic visit. I will say it is a hard transition. I think that emotionally it's very difficult to come back from training in Cuba and training in that system to being in the US. It's like a huge moral blow, I would say. And I think that, so I always say, like, keep your community close and stay linked to the movements you're linked to now, because I think they're gonna be kind of like your foundation to keep you going through medicine and continuing on with that, like, in your forefront. And I think residency is complex, right? I think residency is a hard training, and it takes a significant amount of your time and your spirit. So I think, like, also give yourself grace. Like, if during those periods of time you need to, like, you know, take care of yourself and lean on that community. And that's, you're practicing what you want to build, right? You want to see yourself also in this world. And so I think that the ways that now, I graduated in 2023 from family medicine residency, and I'll be honest, like, well, I trained a lot during COVID. And so I think that that was another layer of complexity in terms of like the more deep years of COVID. And so I think now is when I'm starting to be able to, like, realize the power and the potential that comes with linking to community movement. So I organize with the Humboldt Park Solidarity Network. And I think that a lot of, like, what we're, and also just like within a lot of queer trans organizing within the city. And I think what we're realizing is that it depends on your framework, right? Like, so I'm someone who's like weekly available at the Humboldt Park Free Store to talk about healthcare. We see folks coming in from all different situations, and we're talking about, you know, one, getting people linked to clinic visits, so just offering that resource, but two, a lot of what you're talking about. So we have the tenants' right meetings in that organization, and I think it's just, again, if you have a lens that you want to connect with, being present as a physician in that community to offer the potential resources. And so what that like looks like, for example, even like within, I'm the gender affirming care clinical lead now, right? And so we're starting the shared medical appointments at the FQHC that I work at. And so a lot of that is going to be, one, building the infrastructure to create a space where you can have education, you can do preventative health, but also where you can then look for grants and capacitate organizations that need access to resources in a way that, let's say they don't want to be a 501c3. Let's say we're talking about folks that are doing organizing work and intentionally staying out of that space. We still can make intentional movements to get that funding, to funnel it to spaces like within community organizing, which is, I think, like a lot of what, again, I'm very much in the beginning of that, but I think that's something that excites me about this moment where, again, with the lens of how I was trained, I'm recognizing that we do have to be present and keen to what's happening on the community level. One, just to be present, have conversations, listen to people's stories, but then also mobilize resources to funnel into spaces that that need it, but like may not get it. So yeah.
I don't know.
And just to add to that, in case before, I don't know if Jontay has anything to add, but I think it's important to re-emphasize that a lot of our graduates are also, they've been dispersed all throughout the country and are involved in community aspects all over, but it has been a struggle. It has been a struggle because of the environment we come into. But we, as IFCO Passes for Peace, are also in a phase where we are trying to strengthen, along with our brothers and sisters, comrades from the Solidarity Movement, our placement and connection with ELAM students and grads to these organizations and these movements that are here intentionally, with the fact that if our activists and our comrades are in communication, mentoring students and possibly grads who are interested, that's a way to keep a revolutionary doctor tied to the work that is in community. Even if it's not their native community, they can adopt a place, right? But we have to be intentional about creating that. And now, especially that we are getting stripped of a lot of the major sources of funding that a lot of poor and marginalized people depend on, creating relief funds amongst ourselves as a mutual solidarity network is something that our new executive director is really passionate about, Claudia de la Cruz. And so we are looking to find ways to plug ourselves in. Just recently, we talked to Healthy Hood in Chicago, which has a program where they go into high schools and educate the youth about chronic diseases, trying to equip them with skills to measure blood pressure, take sugar monitoring and all of that. And the point would be to have ELAM grads help with that process, supervise that process, and go beyond that to add in the revolutionary medicine aspect that we learned in Cuba, right? To expose the youth of Chicago public high school students to these realities, but also help our grads be tied to a critical component of this community work. So that's just one example. But we are trying to build that kind of intentional framework because we know how dispersed we are, but we need to now create hubs where people can plug into and do the work that we all urgently need. So thank you so much, Lon. I'm looking forward to continuing communication with you and seeing your application.
Yeah, so just real quickly for Lon and everybody else's sake, I think there are certain similarities to what we did in the late 1960s with the Rainbow Coalition, the Black Panther Party, Young Lords, and today, but there are also real differences. One of those differences is the cancerous growth of the nonprofit industrial complex, who have basically done everything they could to stop the rebuilding of public health systems in the global South under neoliberalism, where they basically, instead of supporting the revolutionary demands of national liberation movements throughout Africa, Asia, and Latin America, instead of doing that, they have built their own parallel systems, whether that's Doctors Without Borders, and I'm going to call them out, Partners in Health, or whatever. They have gotten billions and billions of dollars from well-meaning liberals in the North, basically, to do exactly the opposite of what we're proposing. What should have happened is to basically tell the IMF and the World Bank, we refuse to accept structural adjustment programs. The second part of the problem has to do with the United States. The left has completely ignored how structural adjustment programs in the last 50 years have directly destroyed public health, public education, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what's different about what we did in the 60s and 70s and now. So that means the strategy has got to take on the nonprofit industrial complex, which, by the way, Partners in Health took their colonial model from the global South and applied it directly into the United States during COVID. Partners in Health alone got almost $1 billion in privatized contracts to do contact tracing inside the United States, most of which was illegal at the expense of public health departments. So the strategy has to be to go and do base building among those people most effective. It's not primarily with the left already. That's a small, tiny group. We're a small group, okay? That's not going to cut it. It's got to be with the people most effective.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to the next question from Aliyah Karim.
Hi, thanks again. I'll turn my question into a comment because I see that we're running out of time. I just wanted to mention that I work for the Canadian Union of Public Employees, and we're really happy to support Cubans. We sent a delegation to Cuba last year for May Day, And I'm going to do my best to educate them. I specifically do healthcare research, so to educate, our Canadian trade unionists on what you mentioned here today. So the medical innovations on ELAM, of course, and we're particularly worried about the privatization of healthcare in Canada right now, because there are doctors who are trying to charge people for cataract surgeries, for primary care, and so on. So thanks again for having us and having this discussion. It's really appreciated. And we'll do all that we can to support Cubans in the face of the economic blockade. So thanks again.
Thank you. We appreciate your solidarity. Next question and final question is from Steve Eckhart.
Hey, I want to thank Jontay and Christine and Howard and everyone else for a really excellent program. My main concern is talking about how we can more widely publicize ELAM. I wanted to let people know that on Thursday we met with preachers from some 40 different Black Baptist churches in Chicago, and also with the women's organizations. And but we were there to publicize ELAM. So I know Christine and Howard and Jontay are here. We're also would like to, because this is a project of the Chicago Cuba Coalition, who I work with, to try to reach out to the city colleges, the professors who teach biology, chemistry, etc., so they can let their students know about this. I just want to also give you the good news that we were able to hand out a couple hundred leaflets at the recent, we were invited to do this actually at the recent meeting of the Chicago Teachers Union, where they had a strike vote publicizing the medical school. So I would hope that we could, in Chicago, work together on this. That would be really good. But if there are any other efforts to get the word out more broadly about the medical school, I'd love to hear. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you for all your support over the years and the hard work you guys are putting in at the Chicago Cuba Coalition on behalf of the Solidarity Movement, Cuba, and especially ELAM program. We appreciate it.
So if I could just quickly say to Steve and everybody else here, I think sometimes we make it a little more complex than it is. I would literally say to everybody, go to the closest school, particularly high school, in our case, Chicago Public Schools, where you live or where you work. Take the flyers that Samira and ELAM have produced. I'm not sure if they're in Spanish or any other languages, but we can talk about that later. And literally engage people in a conversation. Sending stuff to the CPS bureaucracy or any other public school bureaucracy in the US or the principals and expecting that to get into the hands of the students is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So we got to go directly to the people. So with CTU, we need to talk to everybody in the union to basically say, can you set up a meeting at your high school where graduates, in our case, Jontay and Christine, one or both of them can come speak directly to the students and their families. That's what we have to do. Going through the bureaucratic structure, and we also, of course, and I'll end with this, we have a great relationship with the head of the faculty union of the 13 community colleges in Chicago and Cook County. So one by one, we're happy to work together with the Chicago Cuba Coalition to get into where the students are and talk directly to them and their families.
I think that concludes our Q&A section. Now the final wrap up. We really appreciate all of you joining us this afternoon for this program. We hope that you are enriched by the testimonies of the graduates and the student from ELAM, as well as our comrade, Dr. Jose Villamarin from Cuba, and Dr. Howard Ehrman for pulling us together and making this possible. This is a tremendous effort, and It took, you know, the support of the National Network on Cuba, their co-chairs supporting us to do this work. And friends of Howard who just get pulled into everything. Dr. Howard Straker, thank you for accompanying us through this process as well. Dr. Andrea Lyman, who is a medical advisory committee member for the ELAM program. There are several ways that folks who are in the healthcare field and who align with our mission can support the ELAM program. Aside from recruiting, we have the medical advisory committee, which is not just for medical professionals, it's for community advocates, everybody who has an interest in helping shape and guide the medical school process for U.S. ELAM students and graduates. And it is labor intensive. Luckily, we've had 234 graduates up till now, but that has been in 17 years of people coming back home, going through the struggles and challenges. And many of you have offered, you know, lines of lifelines and support, just like my comrade Leslie Salgado from Friends of Latin America in Maryland here. But we need more of that help, and we need to be intentional about how we connect folks and prepare them to not feel isolated when they come back to the United States. So I would urge any and all of you who know somebody who wants to apply to reach out to us. The deadline this year is March 15th. We will have a secondary deadline of April 15th announced closer to that time, but it's important for people to know that this would be for the upcoming September cycle this fall, and that we encourage all folks who do not have their college credits done to continue in the struggle and keep in touch with us. We are just one arm of the solidarity work that we are doing here in the United States, but there are critical moments and things that everyone can do in order to support Cuba in general, to call for the end of the blockade by reaching out to your congressmen and women, by also advocating and talking to your neighbors about what Cuba offers in terms of all these medical achievements and more. This is just one webinar. There are so many other topics that can be developed in the future and have been developed in the past as well about the achievements of Cuba, and quite a few of us are experts on that. So how to send you those resources so you can learn from them and also share them, we'd be happy to do. A lot of our co-chairs from the National Network on Cuba, they are resources for information. There's a May Day Brigade coming up this May, one from the NNOC, but also one specifically for Levántate por Cuba that's being led by Dr. Howard Ehrman. You can reach out to him for more information. The job right now for those of us interested in supporting Cuba is to make sure that the right does not have the right to the narrative, that we seize the narrative and reclaim that and understand that we stand on the side of history and the truth. And those who love Cuba will defend it in all its beauty. And all we're asking is for the blockade to be lifted, for Cuba to be able to be the true gem that it is meant to be. So however we got to link up and join hands to do this work, please, please, let us do this. We need to be united now more than ever. Division is the ploy of the enemy, and we cannot dwell on that at all. So thank you. It was an honor this afternoon, and I hope that you all will stay in touch with us. The chat has all our information. Stay tuned for more.
Just real quickly, again, to segue off of Dr. Addrey, thanks to everyone. This is the beginning, not the end. We are in a state of global fascism. As far as some of us are concerned, we now formally have fascism since January 20th inside the United States of America. We have a situation where what's left of the CDC is possibly going to be completely destroyed. We have the United States and Argentina pulling out of the World Health Organization. This has dire, dire consequences already. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to know anything about public health. You just get it. The people have been ordered to return home from the federal government, collaborating in all these different countries, the way that Dr. certainly Jose Armando Arronte Villamarin goes beyond that collaboration. So we are the ones we've been waiting for. This is a collapse completely of what's left of the medical care system in the United States, the public health system. And so we have to figure out how to do this on our own and have a dual strategy in terms of what we're going to do on the ground in where we live, where we work, and what we're going to do in terms of demands of the state. So thanks everyone for coming. We look forward to continuing to work with everyone here. Oh yeah, and one last thing, maybe Cesar could talk about this. We've developed in the last 3 months the Cuba Assessment Network. I'm sorry, Assistance Network. Cesar, could you possibly show that, and maybe, or somebody could, and maybe just briefly mention it?
Thanks, Howard. I mean, if we all can go to the nnlc.org page, there is actually a landing page right there, a hero banner that goes to the Cuban Assistance Network, and it pretty much has provided all the information, very various organizations that you could donate, get involved. So yeah, so if you go to nnlc.org, there's going to be a lot of good resources that you can share, you could print out, and just get involved. I mean, that's because that's the bottom line. You guys got to, we all need to get involved and stay strong in unity. Thank you.